Hello everyone. In today's class, we will go for discussing over verification and validation. So we will discuss here what is verification and what is validation. Then we will see some advantages of verification and validation. And finally, we will go for the concept of deliverables and milestones in context software testing. So as per IEEE, the definition of verification is as follows. It is the process of evaluating the system or component to determine whether the products of a given development phase satisfy the conditions imposed at the start of that phase. So we apply verification activities from the early phases of the software development and check or review the documents generated after the completion of each phase. Hence, it is a process of reviewing the requirement document, the design document, the source code, and other related documents of the project. And verification is related to static testing. So verification is basically the reviewing of the documents that are generated during the entire development of the software. So starting from the requirements analysis, so the SRS document is there, there may be lots of design documents are there may be lots of analysis documents will be there, the code itself. So the reviewing of all these documents are nothing but your verification activity. So if we look at validation, as per IEEE, it is the process of evaluating a system or component during or at the end of development process to determine whether it satisfies the specified requirement. So the validation requires the actual execution of the program. So the validation is dynamic in nature and it requires the execution of the program. So whenever we are talking about the testing or the testing phase itself, so that is nothing but your validation activity. Whereas the review of all the documents that are generated during the development of the software is called the verification activities. Hence, testing includes both verification and validation. So thus we can say testing is equals to verification plus validation. If effective verification is carried out, it may minimize the need of validation and more number of errors may be detected in the early phases of the software development. But unfortunately, testing is primarily validation oriented. So whenever we are talking about testing, then we are generally thinking the real execution of the code. But in reality, if you see the testing, it comprises of verification as well as validation. So if we look at the differentiation of verification and validation, so in verification we can say, are you building it right? And in validation we are saying, are you building the right thing? So the verification, it ensures that the software system meets all the functionality, and the validation ensures that the functionalities meet the intended behavior. Verification takes place first and includes the checking of documentation, the checking of code, etc. Whereas validation occurs after verification and mainly involves the checking of the overall product. Verification is done by the developers and the validation is done by the testers. In verification, here it have static activities as it includes the reviews, the walkthroughs and the inspections to verify the software is correct or not. And validation have dynamic activities as it includes executing the software against the requirements. In verification, it is an objective process and no subjective decision should be needed to verify the software. But it is in validation, it is subjective process and involves subjective decisions and on how well the software works. So this is the way we can go for differentiate between verification and validation. So clear cut, verification is involved with the review of the documents, inspection of the documents, and in validation it is dynamic in nature and it involves the real execution of the code. These are some of the verification advantages. So verification helps in lowering down the count of the defect in the later stage of development. Verifying the product at the starting phase of the development will help in understanding the product in a better way. It reduces the chances of failure in the software application or product. It helps in building the product as per the customer specifications and needs. And if you look at the validation advantages, so during verification, if some defects are missed, then during validation process, it can be caught as failures. If during verification, some specification is misunderstood and development had happened, then during validation process, while executing the functionality, the difference between the actual result and expected result can be understood. So always the validation is done after the verification. So the verification, it helps us to lowering down the defects, or it may go on uncovering the errors at the early stages of the development, because as fast as you uncover the errors during the early stages of the software development, then the time required for the uncovering of errors in the later stage, that is going to be lowered down automatically. So this is the main focus of verification. So if it is done properly, then ultimately the validation activity is going to be more smoother. So validation is done during the testing like feature testing, integration testing, system testing, load testing, compatibility testing, stress testing, etc. So validation helps in building the right product as per the customer's requirement and helps in satisfying their needs. Now we'll see the concept of deliverables and milestones. So deliverables, basically these are the outputs that are generated during various phases of the software development, such as the source code that we are going to get after the coding phase is over. The SRS is the output that once the requirements analysis is over. Software design document that we are going to generate after the design is over. Installation guide, user reference manuals. So these are basically the various outputs that you are getting after the end of a particular phase of the software development lifecycle, and these are called basically the deliverables. Whereas the milestones are the events that are used to ascertain the status of the project. So for example, the finalization of SRS is one milestone. That means this indicates that okay, the SRS is ready and now we are going to freeze the SRS. Completion of software design document. So this is another milestone. The end of coding, that is another milestone. The end of testing, that is another milestone. So the milestones are essential for monitoring the progress of the software development. So that means whatever the timeline that has been prepared for the starting of a particular milestone or the end of a particular milestone, so these milestones are going to help you to check whether you are in line with the timeline of the software development or we are lagging behind. So if you are lagging behind, then you have to pull yourself to inline into the system. Otherwise, whatever the time frame is there, according to the time frame, we are not supposed to complete our project. So this is all about for today's class. Thank you.